Madam President.
Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, today I'm going to be talking about a bill of mine that I think is very appropriate, very timely, the Protect Our Heroes Act, which will federalize certain violent crimes against public safety officers like police and first responders across the country to deter these kind of crimes and to show the men and women in our law enforcement community that we have their back. Before I get into the details of my bill, I want to talk a little bit about a very moving event. I was back home last week in Alaska. I was at the American Legion Post number 15 in Palmer, Alaska. And it was on the commemoration of September 11th. And it was a wonderful remembrance dinner, tons of veterans, patriots. My state is blessed with more vets per capita than any state in the country. But it was focused on law enforcement. We had the Palmer police chief there. We had members of the police department from Anchorage there because we were focused on so many things that came out of that day, 9/11. But honoring our first responders was something that I think America learned, that we need to respect the men and women epitomized by the police and firemen who went up the tower. Many of them knew they were going to die, and they did that. They did that to protect us. And there was this newfound respect for our first responders that came out of the tragedy of 9/11. Now, in my remarks to my fellow veterans in Palmer at the American Legion Post last Friday, I did mention that, one of the elements of what's happening in our country, unfortunately, is that these memories are fading. They're fading. And in some ways, the respect for the police is not just fading, it's being reversed. You see these movements, these national movements of defunding our police, a horrible idea in my view. My state needs more law enforcement, not less. We've seen on our TV screens, our social media channels, there are people, criminals, who are focused on harming the police, killing the police, attacking the police, even taking glee in the killing and the violence of law enforcement. So, Madam President, we've all seen in the past few years a dramatic increase in killings and ambushes. Iowa, New York, Massachusetts, Texas, California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Georgia. This has been happening. It certainly hit home in my state. In Anchorage, in 2016, we had a brave police officer, Arnsalo, who was a victim of a cowardly ambush. In 2016, thankfully he survived, barely. The result of the arrest of the individual who tried to kill him, he ended up being a serial killer, killing 5 others in Anchorage. But this brave police officer found him, stopped him, and almost lost his life. Unfortunately, another officer in a shooting in Alaska, same year, 2016, in Fairbanks, wasn't so fortunate. October 16, 2016, Sergeant Alan Brandt, 11-year veteran of the Fairbanks Police Department, pulling over a suspect to question him, he was shot 5 times and eventually succumbed to the complications related to his injuries. I went to the memorial service. Hundreds of Alaskans, young family, young wife. It was brutal to watch this. These are selfless men and women in my state who are every day getting up to risk their lives, wear the uniform in the line of duty. All of this, Madam President, inspired me to put together my Protect Our Heroes Act, which will enhance federal penalties for the killing or assaulting of public safety officers and first responders, especially increasing penalties for criminals who ambush or lure law enforcement officers for the purpose of committing crimes against them, dramatically enhancing penalties. This is something that I think the vast majority of us in the Senate agree with. Now, I take the opportunity to go running most mornings when I'm here or back home. And when you go running on Capitol Hill, what I see every morning, and I saw it this morning, police officers, no matter the time of day, Capitol Police, sitting in their vehicles or on patrol, their sole purpose is to protect this institution and the members. And this morning, as I usually do when I ran past them, sitting in their car, I just gave them a thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you. We respect you. And we certainly have your back. So, Madam President, or Mr. President, that's why I'm offering this legislation today. I hope my Senate colleagues can come together to support this. I think it would be inconceivable to vote against this bill, especially now when we're seeing these kind of heinous activities like we saw in Compton, California. But we also want to send a message to our first responders and law enforcement. We're watching. We are going to pass laws to disincentivize this kind of heinous action against you. And we have your back and the back of your family members who are probably worried when you go out on your duty every day. I just want to thank my colleague from Pennsylvania. I know that he and I both share a passion on this issue. I think the vast majority of the senators share a passion on this issue, that we should be standing here in the U.S. Senate to make sure our law enforcement know that we have their back. As Senator Toomey just mentioned, this is happening all across the country, that the men and women who put on the uniform to protect us are being targeted simply because they wear the uniform to protect us. If there is not an issue that cries out for some kind of action, some kind of discussion to prevent this and tell these brave men and women, whether in Alaska or Pennsylvania or New Mexico, that we have their back, I don't know what that topic is. I don't know what that issue is. And so, unfortunately, Senator Toomey tried to move his legislation the last couple days. It was thwarted. And now my legislation, to send the message that we're not going to let criminals get away with these kind of heinous crimes, that the U.S. Senate is watching, and that we have the backs of law enforcement and their families. That's a really important message to send right now. So I'm disappointed in my colleague for objecting. We will continue to work on this issue. And as Senator Toomey mentioned, the VAWA issue, which is a hugely important issue in my state, for my constituents. But right now, Mr. President, I think we should be acting on the issue that we're seeing. And that issue is there's a movement across the country that's really focused on perpetrating violence against the men and women who are sworn to protect us. And I can't believe that anyone here thinks that's a good movement. But it's happening in America right now, and we need to send a message. It's unacceptable, and we're going to do everything in our power to stop it.